The only thing is, the most up-to-date information is that last night Ukrainian drones flew into Russian territory, targeting military industry and defense industrial complex facilities. And likewise, Russia launched Shaheds at Ukrainian territory. The risks of large-scale missile and drone attacks on our country remain. The enemy is furious. It's clear that after the special operations carried out by the security service of Ukraine and Pautina targeting Russian airfields and aircraft, as well as the operation to blow up the Crimean Bridge. And in general, there will be more to come, because the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, hinted that the Pautina special operation might be repeated. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, also emphasized this in a rather intriguing way the day before in Vilnius during the meeting of the Bucharest Nine, where the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said that, well, perhaps something else needs to be done so that the Russians stop behaving like the idiots they currently are at the negotiations. And here is what the head of the government says. He noted that the operation was necessary due to failed negotiations, which are yielding no progress, and the intensification of Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities. The Prime Minister added that Ukraine has many other ideas to further enhance this capability. This is not just a one-off episode, it could happen again. We continue to work diligently. You can already see the results in the Black Sea, and we are clearing our airspace of Russian bombers. As the Prime Minister emphasized, Operation Web proves that innovation and new technologies play a decisive role in the war. They are changing the battlefield. Meanwhile, one of the French publications raised an interesting question. Could Ukraine have carried out such a special operation without the help of its Western partners, and primarily the United States of America? Could this have happened without them? What is this about? It's about the fact that the French, they interviewed their former security officers, those who were involved in conducting special operations, and asked them how feasible it would have been to carry out such a special operation independently. To which they received the answer that, it's hard to say. And overall, they don't really believe that this could have been carried out directly without the involvement of the United States of America. That is the opinion of the French experts. Primarily because of the communications. In order to control these drones remotely at the very least, it was necessary to provide a communications link. What do you think? Could the American deep state have been involved in this? That's an interesting question. That is, after all, this is what I mentioned earlier, that there is a political dimension to it. Yes, that is, there are statements from President Trump, there are statements from the White House, from his press secretary, from representatives of the US presidential administration. And then there is the so-called deep state, which acts based on the national security and defense interests of the United States of America. And so they consider, and continue to quite rightly and understandably consider, Russia as a likely adversary and a state that threatens American national security interests. And that is precisely why, actually, they may help Ukraine, among other things. By the way, I would not rule this out. You can see that even Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, says that there are currently quite a lot of votes in the House of Representatives, the lower chamber of Congress, and not only among the senators who initiated the bill to strengthen sanctions against Russia, but also among the congressmen of the lower chamber who support deepening Russia's isolation. This is acknowledged by one of the closest allies of US President Trump, Speaker Mike Johnson. So there is a consensus that it is necessary to put pressure on Russia and punish it for deceiving the United States of America. This is needed. Because in the meantime, Russia is simply really just stalling for time. Look at the negotiations. Well, just look at what they're doing. They are basically dragging things out. We see that once again they're talking about how a new meeting is supposed to take place at the end of June. And this in fact means that they're only interested in stalling for time, not in a real negotiation process. And for that, they need to be motivated, forced, and compelled to actually talk about something realistic. And here both Johnson and Grant both agree. Well, and that's exactly why the Ukrainian delegation flew to the United States. This is one of the goals, because the Ukrainian delegation, led by the first Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Economy Yulia Sviridenko, arrived in Washington to discuss defense support and sanctions against Russia, in particular Lindsey Graham's bill. The agenda also includes a discussion of the situation on the battlefield. There will also be talks about creating an investment fund for reconstruction. Another issue is the return by Russia of deported Ukrainian children and support for this process. We will also discuss Russian propaganda related to church matters, said the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak. He also announced a meeting with representatives of both parties and with Trump's team. They will be informed about Russia's prolongation of the war. Basically, that's the situation. Meanwhile, the command of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has seriously raised the issue of strengthening the development of drone-based air defense. This was stated by the head of the Communications Directorate of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Yuri Ignat. You see, drone interceptors really work. They have proven themselves very well. And it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more creative, it's more innovative, it's higher quality. And obviously these approaches are intended to be applied. Therefore, new units will be introduced. There are already results of Shaheds being shot down by the so-called anti-aircraft drones. This is being implemented within the defense forces of Ukraine. I think this will be scaled up. We need to stay one step ahead, noted Yuri Ignat. Meanwhile, there have been changes within the armed forces of Ukraine's own unmanned systems forces. Robert Magyar Brody has been appointed to replace Vadim Sukharevsky, the legendary Borsuk. He is also a well-known figure who has done a lot of good during the war. His units are active. You know about the famous Magyar's birds. I hope he will prove himself to be quite successful in the unmanned systems forces as well. Ole Apostol was appointed as the commander of the air assault forces, replacing Ihor Skybyok. Ole Apostol is a hero of Ukraine, and he also comes from the air assault forces. Previously, he served as the deputy commander-in-chief. As for Skybyok, he is moving to the position of deputy chief of the general staff. Deputy commander of the National Guard, Belus, has been dismissed from his position. And the commander of the SBS, Sukharevsky, has been appointed deputy of the Operational Command East. And as for Mikhailo Drapati, who previously headed the Land Forces Command, he will become the commander of the Joint Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. He will focus exclusively on frontline and combat matters. In other words, the things Mr. Drapati knows very well, the things in which he is extremely effective. As for the other issues related to the land forces, these will be handled by another person, as stated by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. That's the situation. These are the changes we've had, hopefully to strengthen, to improve the manageability and effectiveness of our armed forces of Ukraine, and this really will only lead to improvement, but in the end we'll see. Well, and I already mentioned Senator Lindsey Graham today. So Senator Lindsey Graham thanked Medvedev for a rare moment of honesty from Russia. Graham thanks Medvedev. He said that He was responding to Medvedev's post on Telegram, which was made after Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian strategic aviation airfields. In his post, Medvedev declared the inevitability of retaliation and said that everything that is meant to explode will explode, and those who are meant to be destroyed will disappear. In addition, he commented on the negotiations in Istanbul, stating that they are not needed for a compromise peace, but for Russia's swiftest possible victory and the destruction of the neo-Nazi government. In response, Senator Graham noted, "Thank you, Medvedev, for a rare moment of honesty from the Russian propaganda machine. Now it is clear that Putin and Russia are not interested in peace. I think this has been clear for a long time, and I hope that eventually the President of the United States, Trump, will understand it as well, who, by the way, is quite easy to reach by phone." As it turned out, the authors of the American magazine The Atlantic found out that in fact Trump continues to use his own mobile phone, his personal iPhone, and he even answers calls from unknown numbers. So it is still easy to reach him by phone, and he hasn't given up his phone. And from a security standpoint, his team is cautious, since this could be exploited for malicious influence or by intelligence agencies of other countries that are unfriendly to the United States. That's another interesting piece of information. Meanwhile, Lindsey Graham keeps pushing forward. He continues to lobby for sanctions. He continues to lobby for support for Ukraine and says that the US must maintain it. But right now, we still have a number of unresolved issues with our partners. I hope that during our delegation's visit to the US, many things will become clearer. And not only that, after all, this also concerns the issue of weapons. We aren't hearing about new packages, and as for the ones we had, we understand they were promised by the Biden administration, but they have a tendency to gradually run out, so we need clarity about what kind of support there will be. Because in my opinion, Ukraine has already made its decision regarding the spring, autumn and summer-autumn campaigns. On the one hand, there will be strikes on Russian military targets in the rear. These strikes will take place both in the occupied territories and on Russian territory. These will be quite painful, large-scale and symbolic strikes on military, industrial, complex facilities and military infrastructure that are actively used by Russia to continue its aggression against Ukraine. In other words, Ukraine will employ every possible method of asymmetric warfare. This is our trump card. This is our card. It's fashionable now, thanks to Trump, to talk about whether you have a card or not. Well, this is our card and we have it. We need to use it, and we will use it to the fullest. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic has evaluated the memorandum that was proposed by Russia in Istanbul during the negotiations. Here's how they evaluated it. In the memorandum that the aggressor country presented at the negotiations with Ukraine on June 2nd in Istanbul, Moscow's demands are written, and they are identical to the demands of the German Nazi Adolf Hitler. This opinion was expressed by the Czech Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jan Lipavsky. We are witnessing yet another in a series of Russian peace plans. It is exactly the same as all the previous ones. Let's not fool ourselves. Ukraine must surrender. The West must surrender. The Nazis wanted the same thing in 1938. The Kremlin has been doing this since 2014, he wrote. The Czech diplomat noted that the illegitimate president of Russia, Putin, is not offering anything new. Russia cannot be trusted, Lipavsky warned. Absolutely right. The Czechs, in general, have been a real source of encouragement lately because of their principled political stance, both in condemning Russia's actions and in calling things by their proper names. Putin cannot be trusted, and he uses negotiations solely to buy time and to manipulate. If you think otherwise, please write about it in the comments. In general, let us know what you currently think about the idea of negotiations. How likely is it that they could result in something positive for us unless Russia is put under pressure? and let's say how much our summer-autumn campaign will outperform the enemy's summer-autumn campaign at the front. In other words, will we, through our asymmetric actions, successful special operations, and strikes on Russian military targets, be able to surpass the enemy and ultimately impose our own scenario from a position of strength even at the negotiating table? The president of Poland, Nawrocki, who has already won the election and is the newly elected president of Poland, expressed hope for the continuation of close partnership with Ukraine, emphasizing the importance of resolving complex historical issues between the two countries. Nawrocki published a statement in response to congratulations from President Zelensky, who expressed expectations for fruitful cooperation with the future president of Poland. Here is what Nawrocki wrote. I look forward to continuing the partnership between our countries based on mutual respect and understanding. I believe that this requires not only good dialogue, but also resolving pressing historical issues. He emphasized the role of Poland as one of Ukraine's most dedicated allies in confronting Russian aggression. Poland has been the staunchest supporter of Ukraine against Russian aggression. No other country understands this threat as we do. In conclusion, Nawrocki expressed hope for continued joint efforts to strengthen relations. I hope that we will continue to work for the common good, to resolve the unsettled past and to build a safe future together. Unfortunately, once again, the past, Volhynia, the tragedy, this weighs heavily. This issue simply does not disappear from the agenda in Polish politics, unfortunately. We are clearly facing a series of debates, discussions, and possibly some rather difficult moments and statements. But still, I hope that Poland will preserve the strategic partnership, even if only for the most basic reasons and calculations, that without a strong, independent Ukraine, a strong, independent Poland is impossible. And based on this, pragmatism will prevail. You might say that pragmatism has not always prevailed in Polish politics and in their view of international relations, especially in Polish-Ukrainian relations. And yes, I can agree with that. But I hope that under the current threat from the external Russian enemy, this pragmatism will nevertheless prevail. Meanwhile, Lithuania has proposed an interesting solution. Former Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis stated that he would like Lithuania to have security guarantees from Ukraine. I have a theory that I can't verify because I can't go to the front. Ukrainians are essentially carrying out this defense on their own. A significant part of Ukraine's defense is carried out thanks to domestic technologies. The recent attack on Russian strategic bombers is a great example, the diplomat emphasized. He emphasized that Ukraine, even without Western intelligence or any support, has destroyed a third of Russia's air fleet and nuclear potential. According to the Lithuanian politician, none of the West's security agreements over the decades has come close to achieving such an effect. So when I hear some people say, Ukraine cannot join NATO because we are not ready to provide it with security guarantees, I think that my country should have security guarantees from Ukraine. If we are already worried about a Russian attack, I would feel much more at ease knowing that Ukrainians would fight side by side with us. This is a new reality that we have not yet realized, Landsbergis said in an interview with Ukrinform. Well, indeed, this is very important, and it is very gratifying that our partners, who now openly say that Ukraine is needed as a guarantor of security, are calling things by their proper names. The Baltic Black Sea community and the partnership among the countries of the North, the Baltics, Poland and Ukraine. It seems to me that this is, after all, an inevitable geopolitical axis. The publication Bild wrote that Putin does not have a silver bullet for a retaliatory strike against Ukraine. Some experts suggest that Russia might decide to carry out heavy strikes to demonstrate its strength. The Ukrainian drone attack on Russian airfields became one of the largest since the beginning of the war and seriously weakened the capabilities of Russian aviation, especially regarding strikes on Ukrainian cities. At the same time, according to experts interviewed by Bild, Russia does not have any wonder weapon for a powerful retaliatory strike. Nikolanga noted that Russia does not have secret reserves or wonder weapons with which they could deliver a retaliatory strike. Do you agree? Absolutely. Meanwhile, the Moscow Times reports that in Bashkortostan, Russia, the one-time payment for signing a contract to participate in the war against Ukraine has been reduced. Starting from June 5th, it will amount to 1 million rubles instead of the current 1.6 million, that is 600,000 rubles less. The decree was signed by the head of the Republic, Radi Kabirov. The regional portion of the payments in Ufa will be cut in half, but the municipal bonus will remain. The federal portion is valid indefinitely throughout all of Russia, and in fact, Bashkortostan is the fourth region to reduce the payments. Previously, the authorities of the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug, Nizhny Novgorod region and Belgorod region had announced the same. The money for the war is gradually running out. It would be good to have even more sanctions and to put more pressure on Russia. This could work in combination with Ukraine's strikes on Russian territory. Remember, Ukrainian intelligence has predicted that by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, things will go really badly for the Russian economy. Let it be so. Take care of yourselves and glory to Ukraine.